Days of Future Future is a very creative Simpsons episode. This is the 18th episode of the 25th season, directed by Bob Anderson, and as long as you don't take it too seriously, I think you'll enjoy it if you haven't seen it yet. It is very, very creative. There's so much in every single scene that I just found to be so fascinating. That's not to say it's perfect. For example, I feel like it maybe focused on Bart a little bit too much compared to, say, some other characters, but generally I really enjoyed this. It starts off with Homer dying, of all things, and it turns out that a certain professor has learned how to clone him, and he dies and gets cloned and dies and gets cloned, and this happens many times over a number of years until we're like 30 years into the future. And then we just see all of these things playing out in these relationships. And honestly, the only thing I didn't love about this is how soon it came after the Christmas episode, which was either this season or the previous season, where the characters are the same age, they have similar relationship problems, so it's not as fresh as, say, in, if they did this episode 10 years later, which would be next year, apparently. According to IMDb, this first aired in 2014. So if they did this episode next year, I think there might have been a fresher perspective, characters' relationships might be slightly different, so it wasn't as unique. The discoveries about, which characters were married to whom and what their relationships were like, it's very similar to what we got in that Christmas episode. But I still really enjoyed it. Bart is struggling to get over his divorce. He makes an interesting decision and takes an interesting step to try and help with that. Homer is now stuck in a computer screen or a monitor or wherever his USB is plugged into because Frank ran out of clones. And Lisa and Milhouse have an interesting relationship in this one. And there's not really much to the narrative in terms of, a clear narrative arc. It's a lot more character driven and driven by their relationships and the highs and the lows, and just observing these changes and having good fun with it. The Simpsons pet I absolutely loved. I won't spoil it by saying anything more, but that really entertained me. And what I will say, which is much better than the Christmas episode, is that we get a lot more of the Simpsons characters in this, the Springfield residents. We get to see a lot more of them, at least as far as my memory goes. I won't spoil it by giving away all of them, because for me that's part of the fun of wondering, which characters we'll see, what they'll look like, what their lives will be like. But just to, I guess, whet your appetite, one of my favourites, and I think it played out really well, was Ralph. I found that to be quite amusing. So I really enjoyed it. It's good fun. It's a little different. Yes, it's not completely different compared to the Christmas episode. The characters are very similar, they're in similar relationship situations, but I still found it to be really fun. I assume that this isn't the last time The Simpsons looks at relationships in the future. Certainly, I'm keen to see where they go with future episodes like this, and it will be very interesting to see if they decide to do this every 10 years or so. I don't know. I feel like maybe if they did do it now, it would be the same. But if it was the same, not complaining. It's pretty good. Really enjoyed it. Very fun, very creative. As long as you don't take it too seriously, and as long as you're not looking for a juicy narrative. It's quite fascinating because it looks at relationships and different kinds of relationships. But in terms of a clear narrative structure, it's maybe not as well structured as some. But because it's got that novelty, it's actually really quite enjoyable.